I'm having a wonderful opportunity today to talk to Doug Schmeiser, who is a professor emeritus of law at the University of Saskatchewan, and he's had a varied career in the legal field, practicing law, serving as a law reform commissioner, and probably best known to me as a dean of law when I was in law school, and of course a well-known criminal law professor. He's written a number of texts, but he's now making the move into the area of fiction. And Doug, I thank you for joining me today to talk about your first book, A Settling of Accounts. Now, I understand this book actually started in concept many years ago. Tell us about its beginnings.
I was on sabbatical in Paris in 1987, and I was working at UNESCO. And in the evenings, when my work was done, I would sit on the left bank as writers historically do, wondering if I couldn't write a novel as well. And I started to toy with the concept of writing a novel. And so I would sit on the bank, have a glass of beer, watch the people go by, and start to write. And in fact, the first chapter was written in Paris, now a long time ago, 33 years, I guess, or perhaps 23 years.
And then it was a while until you picked it back up again, because I know your legal career has taken you around the world with international law issues. And finally now you've come back to writing this. So did you have a picture in your mind of where you wanted this story to go when you started, or did you just start with that no doubt romantically inspired notion when you were in Paris?
I had no idea where the novel was going. I had an idea for the first chapter, and that was it. I had no preconceived plot. I just worked away at it after retirement. It was one of my retirement projects, but then my retirement was delayed because of international work. But about 5 or 6 years ago, I decided it was now or never, and I went to work on it. I've never really understood when novelists have told me that books write themselves, and so it was with this. I started to go back to it and then realized there were a lot of things I wanted to say, as well as the story I wanted to tell, and it just took off from there.
Now, Doug, the book starts with a Calgary lawyer who is, interestingly, sitting in a bar, as you said you wrote when you were in the bar in Paris, sitting in a bar. He sees an attractive woman. It starts with a very romantic theme, and we don't want to give away the end, but some unusual things begin to happen. And you, through the background of your book, you are able to provide commentary on various views you have of the legal system, of the judicial system, and also of law and ethics. Was this an important way for you to get some of those, I guess, those inner feelings, things that you've come across in your profession in law, across to the general public?
Yes, it gave me the opportunity to talk about how the lay person views the law and its operation. I also wanted to talk about the fact that a person through no fault of his own can get into difficulty in the legal system, and in a situation which has enormous financial consequences, which the average person often cannot deal with. But I also wanted to say something about the environment. I wanted to say something about the Saskatchewan locale, and to put all of these things together. And they all fell into place, although when I started out, my only aim was to tell a story, and hopefully an interesting story, but the other ideas developed as I went along.
Well, we know that people are very fascinated with law as a backdrop to fiction, because we see it in television, we see it in the movies. Authors like John Grisham have been very successful with their best-selling books, working their way into movies. Do you see yourself writing more books and continuing with perhaps your main character from the book, Jeff Phillips, or do you think that you would go into some different kind of fiction without a law background?
It's really hard to say. Right now I don't have any plans to do anything, but then when I started this one, I really didn't have any plans and I didn't know where it would take me. But right now I sort of feel the need to relax a bit and forget about that until probably a month or so from now. My mind will change, but right now I'm happy having accomplished this and finding out how difficult it is to write. how much effort most writers put into it, and from my perspective, how difficult it is to write fiction as opposed to legal texts. I didn't have nearly as much difficulty in writing about law generally uh, as I did with this book, because I found it easier to write about social problems which have legal implications, how law and society can deal with those problems, what are better views, what are the social, legal, and moral consequences of an issue. But I found that when it came to writing about emotions, about anger, about passion, about love, about greed, about blackmail, it was much more difficult. Perhaps because I had very little experience in those areas, but uh, it was a real learning experience. Most of all, what I've got from it is a learning process and a new experience which far outweighs everything else. I had no idea that the book would be published. And I now realize how hard it is for most first-time writers to get the first book published. I didn't realize that. Certainly when I wrote a legal text, the publishers were always waiting, and I naively assumed that that was the same for any kind of writing. I now realize it's not the case. I've learned, for example, that of every 100 books which are written, only 2 are ever published in the field of fiction, so the odds aren't all that good.
But you mentioned all these things: love, greed, passion, blackmail, all components of your book set against this legal backdrop, which is very accurate. And as we talked about, you get a chance to let the readers know your background feelings. But I must, for someone who says that they really didn't know how to write romance, Doug, I must tell you, I never knew those years when I was watching you in law school when you were the dean of law, that you had all that passion in you. I read those chapters. Now tell me, how did your wife react when she read that? Did she go, "Oh, that's my Doug"?
Uh, I think people close to you are often your critics, because it's done in a good sense. They're trying to help you. There were some things where I certainly relied on Irene's advice and on the advice of others as well, because I didn't feel competent to deal with some of the medical and social issues. For example, I had to find out how a woman reacts who gives birth to a stillborn child, and I was helped by the head of the natal care unit at the University Hospital, who spent a lot of time with me trying to explain it from a woman's point of view. Similarly, when it came to the diagnosis of cancer and the stages that a person goes through who has cancer, was the result of conversations with people very experienced in that area. I didn't have as much problem with the legal areas because of my background and training, but in these other areas I had to do a lot of research. I also had to learn how to drill an oil well, and the problems that can arise and the potential pollution that it can cause. And I found the only oil well driller in Saskatoon who was very kind to me and spent quite a number of hours explaining how the system works. And I'm very, very grateful to those people. And so having people read it in advance of publication, give me their ideas, was very, very important.